One of my favorite Hebrew poets is named Shaul Chernichovsky. He wrote a poem called Ani Ma'amin in the 1890s, and the lyrics were set to music. And in Israel, this song has become kind of like a folk classic. Some see it almost as like an alternative national anthem. Think of it kind of as like a "This land is your land" or "My country, 'tis of thee" kind of song. And the words have something to say about this week's Torah portion. So I'll share the first stanza, which is indicative of the whole. It goes like this. Sachki sachki al hachalomot, zu ani hacholem sach. Sachki ki v'adam amin, ki hodeni ma'amin bach. Sachki ki v'adam amin, ki hodeni me'amin bach. And it goes like that on and on. And the first stanza translates to laugh at me, laugh at all of my dreams. It is I, the dreamer, who speaks. Laugh at me because I still believe in people, because I still believe in you. These words are an important reminder about faith and belief, and they'll stand in stark contrast with what we read this week in our Torah and Haftarah, where we find stories about leaders whose faith leads them astray. In the Torah, we hear of Pinchas, the grandson of Aaron, the son of Eleazar, the high priest. Our tradition assumes that because of his position and his family yichus, that Pinchas is likely to be the successor to Moses, that he will lead the people into the promised land once Moses dies. And yet we know, as we've just heard, that does not come to pass. He will not lead the people. And the tradition assumes it's because of his actions in these parshayot. For you see, Pinchas sees the people go astray, and he feels so inflamed by the insult to God that he seeks out the wrongdoers and he murders them in front of a crowd. It's pretty extreme. It's rather harsh. But isn't that what God wants? A true believer, someone who will act for God's honor and defend God. Well, it would seem not to be the case, since one of the very next acts is the elevation of Joshua in Pinchas's place. God clearly doesn't approve, but why exactly is left open-ended until we read a little bit more from the Haftarah. The usual Haftarah for this week takes us hundreds of years into the future, where we read about the prophet Elijah. The prophet Elijah has been toiling for God against all odds. He flees from a corrupt king and queen who have murdered all of the other prophets of God. And now they chase Elijah, hoping to finally end his life as well. Our prophet seeks solitude and safety in a cave, and there he encounters God. This passage is one of my favorites in all of the Tanakh, in all of the Hebrew Bible, but we'll only look at the very end of it, where God asks Elijah, "Why are you here, Elijah?" And Elijah says, "I am moved by zeal for Adonai, but the Israelites have forsaken you and your covenant. I alone am left, and they are out to take my life too." And the very next thing that happens after Elijah utters these words is God instructs him to anoint a new prophet who will succeed him. Once again, we have a leader of Israel who is moved by zeal, a true believer just like Pinchas was a true believer. And yet he's done something so egregious that God decides he can no longer serve as a prophet. Now, in neither story does God openly rebuke these leaders or reveal the reasons why they must stand down. But under the surface, there is clearly disapproval. And yet they seem exactly like the types of figures we associate as religious communal leaders, men of faith and passion, conviction, uncompromising belief. Both show that they will do anything for God. So why does God reject them? God rejects them because their belief in God is more important to them than their belief in humanity. Pinchas will kill an Israelite without a second thought, without remorse, because of a sin. Pinchas is more moved by anger at an insult to God than by any reluctance at the thought of spilling blood. And Elijah's zealous belief has led him to imagine that he stands all alone. He's become blind to all of the people's loyalty. And so he's willing to abandon them, to live out his pure faith alone in a cave. These leaders have more faith in God than in people. And that is a dangerous stance, one we should distrust, one we should fear. God, in our tradition, in pairing these stories this week, makes plain a truth that religions and religious communities tend to forget to their peril. That God cares more that we believe in each other than that we believe in God. In fact, our belief in God should be what leads us to believe in one another. As Rabbi Ruvain Hammer said, religion is what we do in our togetherness, not in our aloneness. Pinchas, for all of his fervor for Adonai, fails to understand that God does not want the sinner executed, not even excommunicated. God wants them to be drawn close. If God killed every one of us who does wrong, what kind of world would be left? And yet Pinchas is ready for just such a crusade. And Elijah, for all of his faith, fails to realize that God doesn't want to be found in the solitude of a cave, retreating from people. Once we believe that reaching out to God is about eluding people or about eliminating people rather than elevating people, we've lost the path. We no longer walk with God. A true believer cannot be self-righteous because the point of faith isn't to be standing alone with God. It's about standing and supporting others and, in fact, finding God through those actions. And so a person of faith who walks with God must always be ready to say with a full heart, even during disappointment, even when the days are dark and bleak, even while some will sneer and call them naive or foolish, what Pinchas and Elijah could not say. Sachki ki va'adam amin ki odeni ma'amin bach. Laugh at me, but I still believe in people. And I still believe in you.